President Trump has been in Florida for the Thanksgiving holiday, and once again, he's spending his time at a Trump property. The visit marks the 102nd day out of 308 days in office that the president has stayed at a Trump-owned location. While in the Sunshine State, the commander-in-chief is taking part in one of his favorite pastimes, hitting the links for a round of golf once again this morning. Yesterday, he teed off with Tiger Woods and Dustin Johnson at the Trump National Golf Club in Jupiter. In his first 9 months in office, President Trump unofficially has logged approximately 60 rounds of golf. That puts him on pace for 80 rounds in his first year as president. By comparison, former President Obama played about 38 rounds a year during his 8 years in office. And ironically, Trump often criticized his predecessor for playing too much golf. But Trump's golf game didn't take away any time away from what seems to be his other favorite hobby, that is Twitter wars. Trump announced in a tweet that he passed on being named Time Magazine's Man of the Year. In response, the publication says the president is incorrect. Joining us now are Richard Painter, chief White House ethics lawyer under President George W. Bush, and MSNBC political contributor and politics editor at TheRoot.com, Jason Johnson. Richard, let me start with you. You have commented widely about the president spending a lot of time at Trump properties over the course of the first year of his presidency. What's the recourse that taxpayers have here who are upset about the amount of time he's spending at resorts that his company owns?
Well, it's the amount of time, it's the cost of the security detail in the transportation to these properties. That's money. It's running into the millions of dollars. But the other concern is that the president is so obsessed with his own business and his own family interests that he is not focusing on doing the job effectively. This has been a very, very rocky first year for this administration. I don't think that his running off to his properties all the time or promoting his own businesses is helping at all. That being said, I'd much rather see him playing golf than playing around with his Twitter account. That's not working at all. It's really making him look very, very immature, this Twitter war. And, you know, who cares whether he was going to be Man of the Year for Time Magazine? I mean, he's President of the United States. If he doesn't want to do his job and focus on his job, then he ought to leave and let somebody else do it.
Jason Johnson, how easily can you tune out that noise, if that's what Richard Painter is saying there, what the president is saying on Twitter, when he comments on Time Magazine or he comments on these 3 basketball players arrested in China?
Oh, well, look, honestly, you can tune it out if you want to. If you're not on Twitter, as millions of Americans aren't on Twitter, you don't have to see everything that the president says. But I want to go back to something you mentioned before. What can the taxpayers do about the fact that the president of the United States is spending millions of dollars of tax money on his own properties and making a profit by bringing our soldiers, our troops, our transportation, and our Secret Service at his own properties? You can tell your member of Congress. You can tell members of Congress, make him pay. Make it a hashtag, make him pay. There are ways that voters can say to their representatives in the government, look, we don't feel that it is necessary or reasonable for the President of the United States to be running up such a ridiculous bill. He has spent more money in this first year between him and Ivanka and Jared than Obama did in his first 4. So that's what I think voters should do. Get active and get involved. You can ignore him or listen to him, but you can't let Donald Trump just continue to spend our money.
Richard Painter, let me ask you about the role his children are playing. Of course, his 2 sons are now running the Trump organization. His daughter is headed to India here in a couple of weeks. I gather one of his sons will be going to India as well, independent of that, to open up 2 new Trump hotel properties in India as well. How much of a concern is that to you here, what the Trump children are up to?
Well, it's a big concern. The Secretary of State is upset, rightfully so, because the Secretary of State is in charge of our foreign policy, not the President's daughter and son-in-law. This is a republic, not a monarchy, and the Secretary of State is not a lapdog, a hired help for the President's daughter. Jared and Ivanka, there's a lot of debate about whether they ever could have been legally put in the White House to begin with. The Office of Legal Counsel, the Justice Department, covered for the president on that. But this is clearly an abuse of power. In a republic, we do not have the president's family running our country. That's not going to happen. And the American voters are not going to tolerate it. But once again, Congress has a job to do, and they're not doing it. They're not exercising any oversight over this administration. They aren't finding out where the foreign government money is coming into the Trump business organization. Congress doesn't care. And I think it's going to be high time that the voters let Congress know that they aren't doing their job.
Jason Johnson, I saw you nodding there as Richard Painter was talking. What's it going to take to catalyze Congress to do more?
Well, firing them. That's pretty much all you can do. Look, back in the early 2000s, you know, it was Halliburton. Halliburton became a millstone around the neck of the Bush administration because there were questions as to whether or not Cheney's associations with that company had something to do with our war policy. We have the same thing going on now. Every single place that Donald Trump opens up a casino, opens up a hotel, those places become de facto embassies. And leaders in foreign countries feel that they have to go to those places and put money in his personal pockets in order to get access to the President of the United States. If the current members of Congress won't do anything about that graft and that nepotism, then there need to be new members of Congress. I don't care if they're Republicans or Democrats, but someone who is more concerned about the safety and the independence and our own sovereignty than they are about placating the man who happens to be at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Richard Painter, there's been a lot of focus, continues to be a lot of focus on that special election in Alabama. The president has weighed in, throwing his support, if not fulsomely, at least somewhat here behind Roy Moore. And we had Kellyanne Conway, another one of his advisors, doing the same thing. In response to that, you've invoked the Hatch Act. Explain that piece of legal of law there and how that might affect what's going on here.
An official, United States government official, other than the president and the vice president, but a government official in the executive branch is prohibited from using his or her official position to either oppose or support a candidate in a partisan election. President Trump is exempted from that, so is the vice president. But Kellyanne Conway broke the law when she stood on the White House lawn and in an official interview trashed on Doug Jones, who's a candidate for that Senate seat. That is a clear violation of the Hatch Act. I've not heard a single Hatch Act lawyer defend what she did. This is her second major violation of an ethics rule. If this White House doesn't fire her, it is clear that they have no interest in enforcing the standards with respect to their staff. And once again, if Congress doesn't insist that this White House fire people like Kellyanne Conway who violate the law, then Congress is going to have to get booted. We're getting fed up in this country, and I'm a Republican, been a Republican for 30 years, but I'm not going to stand for a Congress that just sits down and watches things happen like what happened the other day on the White House lawn. She's pushing a pedophile for the United States Senate in violation of the Hatch Act, and she can do that on her own lawn, on her own time.
Richard Painter, thank you very much. Jason John, thanks to you as well. And perhaps you enjoyed some homemade pie during your Thanksgiving feast. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is